Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the members of the public and those people that are online on YouTube. Just a reminder to everyone that it has been recorded and it is live on YouTube. This is part 2 of our compulsory matters. But before I start, I just want to read out a statement. I wish to address comments made publicly by a councillor during the Taupō District Council workshop on the 24th of February 2026 regarding the legitimacy and accountability of the Taupo-Kaingaroa Trust Board. The statement made does not represent the views of the Mayor or the Council. The comments were inappropriate and were made independently of Council policy or agreed positions. During the same workshop, reference is made to the statutory timeframes for completing the joint management agreement, and it was noted that the parties were now well beyond the 18-month period set out in the legislation. It is important that councillors are not operating under any misunderstanding in this regard. I acknowledge that the legislative timeframe has been exceeded and will remain outside of that mandate. The Council remains committed to respectful dialogue, good faith relationships, and the proper exercise of its governance responsibilities. Council acknowledges the importance of constructive engagement and upholding public confidence in its processes and partnerships. Further to this, I wish to formally acknowledge Taupo-Kaingaroa Trust Board. So thank you for that. And Nick, are you ready to commence with your presentation? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. You've got the Heather and Nick show today. Unfortunately, Sue's not available, so we'll do our best to fill in her shoes. It's just me. Is that quite loud? No, just me. Okay, sorry. We've got a presentation to run through, much like we did last time. There are a couple of logical places to stop for questions, so it would really help us in terms of the flow of our presentation if we can hold off questions to those couple of places. We're essentially going to cover the balance of the compulsory matters that sit in the legislation. So they're largely around monitoring, enforcement and customary activities. And then, as I say, the purpose today is to allow you to ask questions about them and to understand, because monitoring, enforcement and customary activities are probably not activities that you have a lot of interaction with in the day-to-day running of the business. So just to quickly recap, last time when we were talking about compulsory matters, we started with the geographical extent that the joint management agreement is required to apply to. We also talked about the process requirements in relation to district plan changes and private plan changes, and we also touched on resource consent requirements as well. I put up this little diagram last time. Its intent was just to show the interaction between the different elements that we're required to cover off in the joint management agreement itself. And we talked a lot about the plan change process and the resource consents process. Today we're going to talk about monitoring. And the reason that monitoring is sitting in the agreement is because it has the potential to play quite an important role in terms of shaping the way that we look at plan changes and resource consenting. The whole principle of monitoring is that you're looking at the effectiveness of what you're doing, and then you're changing the way that your district plan operates over time, which then flows through into the way that resource consents are administered as well. So, monitoring. Just a little reminder that when we're talking about monitoring, we're talking about monitoring that council does in the context of the Resource Management Act. So it's not monitoring that we're doing under any other piece of legislation. It's simply under the Resource Management Act under Section 35. In addition, we're talking about monitoring that council does under the Resource Management Act, that relates to the Waikato River or activities in the catchment of the Waikato River, so that blue area we talked about last time, that might affect the river. So that's the context within which we're talking about monitoring. Under the Resource Management Act, there are a number of different types of monitoring. The first of those is the state of the district monitoring. So this is the work that we do to understand the environment that we're operating in. That might be monitoring of things like the spread of biodiversity that we've got. It's one of our functions under the RMA to look at significant natural areas and their protection. So to do that, we've got to understand where they're located. Are they growing? Are they declining? The second one up there is around efficiency and effectiveness of our district plan. So you'll remember our district plan's got a whole bunch of rules in it which govern how land is used or subdivided. In the context of the Waikato River, we might have rules which control the management of earthworks. And that's about stopping sediment getting off-site and into waterways. In this context, tributaries and the Waikato River itself. So our efficiency and effectiveness monitoring might look at whether our earthworks rules are actually achieving those outcomes. Third one up there is around the exercise of delegation or transferred functions. That's actually not relevant for us, given we haven't transferred any functions. Then the fourth one is around efficiency and effectiveness of our processes. So again, that's a very internally focused set of monitoring. That's how well's Heather's team doing issuing consents within statutory timeframes, as an example. Last one is around the exercise of resource consents. So when Heather's team issues resource consents, they've often got conditions attached to them, and we're required to go and monitor whether those conditions are being achieved. There might be things like a planting plan or a landscaping plan that might have to be put in place. So those are all the types of monitoring that are potentially covered in relation to the Waikato River and activities in the catchment affecting the river.
Nick, can I just add, for those that are following along, perhaps in the legislation, you're basically outlining Section 47 of the Ngāti Tuwharetoa Raukawa and Te Arawa River Iwi Waikato Act, aren't you? So that's exactly what that provision outlines. Thanks.
Yes, through the chair, this brings up a question of mine. Recently, Mangakino Councillor Woodward has been highlighting the fairly poor state of Mangakino Lakes area, which is part of the Waikato River, which is part of this catchment. So I'm interested then, the current Waikato River JMA has been going since 2009, 2010. So what good has the existing JMA agreement done for the health of the Waikato River? And if it's not their responsibility, whose is it?
So I believe the issues that Councillor Woodward's been talking about in the past have been in relation to water quality in that location. Water quality is not a function of Taupō District Council. It's not a territorial function under the Resource Management Act. It's a function which sits with the Waikato Regional Council. And that's probably one of the reasons why under the Upper River legislation, the Regional Council and the iwi authorities are required to have a similar joint management agreement. So we deal with the stuff on the land.
No, sorry, I wasn't pointing at this council. No, I recognise that the council's responsibility is not the water quality of the Waikato River, but I was just questioning, well, there has actually been a Waikato River's JMA in place for over a decade, so it's been held. One of the points of this JMA going forward is that we want to be looking after the lake and the waters and all that sort of stuff. I'm just interested, where's the evidence that the JMA we've already got for the Waikato River has done that.
I'll let the regional council present their own evidence with regard to water quality changes, but I guess what I would say in a general sense is the improvement of water quality takes decades. And I think we've seen that through the work that the council and other partners have done looking at the Lake Taupō catchment and the $80 million investment that we've made there. If I think about the vision and strategy and its implementation, that's the vision and strategy for the Waikato River. If I think about its implementation through the regional plan, the intent there was that will be a decadal change in terms of water quality improvements. So to put in place an agreement and expect that there will be change within a matter of years is probably expecting too much when it comes to water quality on the scale of a catchment. So, on to our requirements under the legislation with regard to monitoring. They are essentially around setting up a process for a conversation. There's a requirement that the council and TMTB meet twice a year to have a conversation, and in that conversation we need to talk about the monitoring that council's intending to do, and we've been through the different types of monitoring. The geographic area that monitoring might apply to, where we might be more targeted than other areas, and some opportunities for Te Whātua to potentially participate in that monitoring process. If I think back to some conversations we've had with Tarrant in the past around monitoring, they've brought to us information that they've collected and suggested that could be a contributing factor to our own state of the district monitoring. So there's a chance for two-way conversation about information that we both might have that would be relevant to the other party. The other thing we need to do in those conversations is talk about any results that we get from the monitoring that we do, and then what we're going to do with that. So if we've done some state of the district monitoring and it's led to a better understanding of some emerging issues, then what do we intend to do about that? The final point there is around a 5-yearly review. So under the Resource Management Act, councils are required every 5 years to do a big review of their district plan and say how well is it going and what sort of changes might be required going forward. Our requirement under the river legislation is to have a conversation with the Trust Board about how they want to be involved in that process of review.
Councillor Mertz, can we, I think the presenter is asking we hold the questions to the end, or is it urgent you speak now?
Oh no, I just followed the suit of Duncan Campbell, who also had time to speak, so I'm going to speak now. Just on monitoring, section 47, Nick, you talked about the monitoring and enforcement and the powers. Can you confirm that the enforcement of powers under the current Resource Management Act remains solely with the council?
Enforcement powers do, yes. And the next slide gets us on to enforcement. Nice little segue. Enforcement can deal with a whole range of different activities that council does. It's think of it as a spectrum. At one end, we've got going and having a chat to somebody who's done something that contravenes, say, a requirement in a resource consent or a rule in a district plan. At the very end of the other opposite end of the spectrum, you've got orders issued by the Environment Court which must be complied with. And sitting in between, council's got a range of tools like abatement notices that we can use to try and get people to a point where they're complying with the rules or the requirements that they're meant to be achieving. So, our requirement under the river legislation is to have a meeting twice a year with the Trust Board. Chances are that we would combine this meeting with the monitoring meeting, given that monitoring and enforcement are reasonably reasonably aligned. So as part of that meeting that we'd have twice a year, we need to have a conversation about any criteria that we might apply before we go and take enforcement action. Secondly, we need to talk about any enforcement action that we have taken and what's come out of that. And then lastly, we need to have a discussion, and it's simply a discussion as part of this meeting, about whether there's any potential for the Trust Board to be involved in enforcement action that we take going forward. Actually, I might pause there because Heather's got a couple of good examples.
Good afternoon. So we thought it'd be good to just pause and try and give you an example that you can imagine, well, not imagine, but envisage, because it's quite we'll go with the example. So we are clearly talking about a catchment area. We've had the map at the beginning. We've talked about the catchment area. We haven't taken any enforcement action in that area. So I just want to give you an example to help focus the mind to one that is just slightly outside that catchment area at the Control Gates Bridge. So last year, Woolworths, as we all know, were redeveloping their site. They held a resource consent and it had conditions. So when Nick's talking about monitoring the exercise of a resource consent is checking how someone is doing their resource consent. Are they following through with what they said they were going to do? So in May last year, we had some quite significant rain, and it turned out that the stormwater controls didn't work as they should have for Woolworths, and it went down and went into the river. So in the scale of discussion, as Nick said, for enforcement, there is have a chat, issue a warning, issue an infringement, an abatement notice, go to court. There's a whole range of things that we can do. At that point, we had the chat. We had a very serious chat. We also talked with our iwi partners. So from that incident, we spoke to the Trust Board, we spoke to Hikawai, we spoke to the other partners that we have already for the JMA. Move on another month, we had another rain event, and this time the stormwater failed again in terms of it went down into the river. So this is where we took action and put an abatement notice. Abatement notice is a type of enforcement action that is very much more than a slap on the hand. It's a instruction to do something. So this went to all the directors of Woolworths, and some action was taken and things were resolved and fixed up. What this part of the arrangement is it's giving an opportunity to have a discussion about if a situation happens and someone doesn't meet their resource consent conditions, what are the particular types of things that the Trust Board is interested in, and where would they like to be involved? So I hope that's kind of an example that can help you kind of think what enforcement maybe is if you haven't come across it before. And the second thing I wanted to talk about here is that there have been recent changes in the Resource Management Act last year, where the government has given a strong indication that compliance with resource consent conditions and enforcement is something they want to see increase. They want to see it taken very seriously. And so what they did was they increased the amount of a fine for an infringement, and they took some other steps in that area. And one of the other indications they gave is that the likes of ourselves, the Territorial Authority, should actually have some kind of policy or strategy where we outline and are clear about the different steps that we would take and what would happen if someone did, for instance, what happened with Woolworths, and how they would know that they're likely to get an abatement notice. So we're trying to provide some transparency for developers and for our community. So that is an opportunity that we have been thinking about for quite some time, where the likes of these discussions where we say there discuss criteria for commencing enforcement, would be the sort of thing that might find its way into that policy, because it's informing how we would make this discussion, how we would make decisions for activities that might impact the river. Does that help kind of unpack into examples, kind of some of the terms and words that we're talking about?
Through the chair, can I just ask that wouldn't Taupō District Council have done that anyway, whether there was a JMA in place or not? Because surely that's our responsibility when we have an organisation impacting our stormwater.
Exactly. So that's an example of something where that relationship that we have, right, and the impact of those particular actions on the river, we went through our channels and it's like, you know, saying that that's what's happened, regardless of having a JMA. However, what we're talking about today is trying to unpack to you how the JMA would work in terms of we've been monitoring some consents in an area, and these are some of the findings we've had, or we're looking to take some enforcement action. That last point I gave about creating a policy or direction or strategy, these kind of discussions that are outlined that you'd have as a result of the JMA gives that opportunity to inform those decisions about when we might take enforcement action. So that's a little bit different. It gives us more, it gives the partnership some standing to look at those matters.
Councillor Foreman.
I was very similar to the lines that Sandra just brought up. I'm still struggling to understand how much of a difference is this from our BAU to, other than we are now going to include tūwharetoa in the conversation. It doesn't sound like much of this is actually beyond our BAU. Is that correct?
Correct. In that these requirements are the mandatory requirements. They already exist for the likes of our arrangements with Raukawa and with Tarot, Te Aroa River Iwi Trust. We'd simply be replicating the same process and the same information, in all likelihood, with the Trust Board. So it's the compulsory matters around monitoring and enforcement are very contained and not particularly onerous on council.
Can I say, it does take it a little bit step further though. So at the moment we do it because we have relationship and it's the right thing to do. This says actually you will meet twice a year and have that discussion and be open about that, and there is an opportunity to ask questions.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I'm just going to bounce off this, but float back to just a basic question, really. I mean, we're talking about potentially expanding the scope of the existing fairly narrow focused Waikato River JMA. I'd just like to know some real world examples of how it's been, that Waikato River's JMA has been in place since 2009 or so, 15 years. So what good has come of it? What good has come of it that you could show us that, hey, this would be good. This would be a good reason to make it bigger.
I think that's certainly an interesting question. Certainly not one to talk about in the context of monitoring and enforcement, but look, we'd be more than happy to come back and answer that in the context of the next couple of workshops which are addressing additional matters, which is what I think you're asking. What value did the additional matters add?
What value have we had from the existing JMA?
Yeah, point of order, needless repetition.
Needless repetition?
Yes,
well,
we've spoken about this. Nick has addressed your statements. Can we move on?
Can I just clarify? So, Nick, can you answer the question? Because I think Councillor Campbell might be confused about the JMA that exists previously and the conversation we're having on this JMA. So, can we just clarify that for the people that are watching.
Right. So if I understand correctly, the reference that you've made, Councillor, is to the existing joint management agreements that we have with Raukawa and with Te Aroa River Iwi Trust within the context of the same piece of legislation. In which case, those two existing joint management agreements stick essentially to the mandatory matters as we've outlined in this workshop and the previous workshop. So those two agreements don't delve into additional matters.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, that they probably have relevance, of course, but I was referring probably to the existing Waikato Rivers JMA, which we're looking at right now. The question was, what good has that done us?
So,
but obviously, yeah.
So we have two existing joint management
Yes.
agreements with Raukawa and with Tarrant.
Oh, but there is also the Waikato Rivers JMA. I'm not getting confused on that, is it?
I think you're getting very confused. We have an existing joint management agreement with the Trust Board.
Yes.
That relates to the appointment of commissioners to notify resource consents and notify private plan changes under the Resource Management Act. That's a joint management agreement which is prepared under the Resource Management Act, not under the river legislation. It's a completely different type of agreement prepared under very separate legislation and is not relevant at all.
So we can't use them as any of those JMAs we've got at the moment as examples of that this is indicative of what this JMA could be going forward.
What you can do is look at the joint management agreements that you have with Raukawa and with Tarrant, which have been formed under the river legislation and which do align to the mandatory requirements which sit in the legislation. Neither of those agreements go any further into extension matters other than to provide for a committee to get together a couple of times each year and have a conversation.
Oh, no, but if they're examples of the mandatory minimum, I suppose, it would be nice to hear some success stories. What have they achieved?
Can I just jump in on this one? Councillor Campbell, I really appreciate your questions, but I think the purpose of today is to simply give you a level of information about what's actually legally required from a JMA in relation to the Upper Waikato Rivers Act. So maybe we could just let Nick and Heather, who are doing a fantastic job, carry on through the conversation, because they're simply taking you through the sections 45 to 50 of the Upper Waikato River Act in terms of what's required.
Are you other councillors happy for Nick? He asked for the questions to be held till they got through it, because unless you've got something...
Through the chair, then I ask for some consistency, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there are questions around monitoring and enforcement, now's a good time to cover those off.
Councillor Murch.
Thank you, Nick. So just in the context of enforcement, are you saying, so council officers, you guys are saying that the Tū Wharetua Māori Trust Board may be involved in discussions or support roles in regards to enforcement, but they cannot independently enforce themselves. That mandate remains with the Taupō District Council, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
And then my question, thank you very much for the example, Heather. So again, in terms of monitoring and enforcement, does this just formalise what already happens in practice? Is that what you're saying?
To a certain extent, but it also enables, like I said, if we maybe just go back to that other slide, the terminology on enforcement is an opportunity to discuss. So by discussing, you're having a free and frank conversation and getting feedback and understanding one another and building relationship. So it helps inform our thinking and helps us better understand each other. And that opportunity is there, but it's do goodwill, So this enables a formalisation of that, and so both parties can come to the table for that discussion, as opposed to we'll tell you when we think we need to, you know.
And
Yeah.
again, that doesn't override council's statutory role of enforcing.
That's right.
Correct. I think the way I'd frame it is, at the moment, the communication around enforcement happens on a case-by-case basis. What this meeting twice a year does under the river legislation is it creates space for a more strategic conversation about what's council's overall program of monitoring, what's it identifying, and what changes might we make to our rules to actually better achieve the outcomes that we're looking for, or to address the issues that might be arising. So I think that's probably the difference between current practice, which is communication on a case-by-case, versus a more strategic conversation a couple of times a year.
Councillor Foreman, did you have a question relating to the subject? Were you happy to wait?
It was actually around the monitoring. I think I picked up that you said in the monitoring space that the partners could also then look at how everybody is doing the monitoring, and it could possibly be strengthened. So, well, yeah, I'm just, is that already currently being done?
I don't think so.
Okay, so that is definitely something that we can actually do better as a council, as a part of this agreement, is actually sharing of information.
A little bit like enforcement. I think it probably switches the conversation from a case-by-case basis. So there may be the odd conversation that happens around, we've got some information that might be relevant to you. I think what this does under the Act is it pushes the two parties to have a more strategic conversation about monitoring going forward.
Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you, Worship. This is a hypothetical question, and but I think it's relevant. If either the Trust Board or Taupō District Council are the organisations who incur the infraction, what is the process in that case?
As in
Because it's most likely to be council, actually,
yeah,
that
so
incurs the infraction. So what is the process when we're the bad guys? What happens then?
I think I know where your example's coming from. So as we said at the beginning, there's a range of tools available in the enforcement toolbox, which can be a conversation to formal warnings, to infringements, to abatement notices, and depending on where that goes in the conversation. So anyone holding a resource consent or not meeting their conditions, or doing something that breaches the Act or a rule in the district plan, can be subject to that enforcement action. And it's a case of working through what the factors are. And that's what I said about currently we don't have a transparent policy around that to make sure that there's consistency, so that it's clear to the community, developers, and any party that everyone is treated the same, or what factors made up a decision to take enforcement action or not to take enforcement action.
Really, do we have an independent person or organisation? If it's us, we're the ones that are likely to cause an issue somewhere, and we've got two parties going on here. I mean, do we do enforcement on ourselves? We
do it on occasion.
Okay.
On occasion.
Right.
But in the context of this River Act and the enforcement section, this is council acting with its hat on as the planning authority. It's not council acting as an applicant or a holder of a consent who might have breached that consent. So the requirements on council as a mandatory requirement under the river legislation is to hold these conversations twice a year around enforcement. That's all about us with our planning authority hat on. Now, there are certainly situations where we're sitting there with our our consent holder hat on and we have a discharge to water, for example, and we act as a good neighbour and a good corporate body, and we communicate that to our partners, including our iwi partners, but that's not part of this. It's not a mandatory requirement. Yep.
Thank you. Want to carry on?
Yes. So we'll jump into customary activities. And customary activities in the context of this agreement must relate to the Waikato River, and in this context they could include activities on the banks of the Waikato River. And that's important to us because most of our regulation doesn't relate to the water. Most of our regulation applies to land. So we're probably talking about customary activities occurring on the land on the edges of the Waikato River or its tributaries. And in this context, the river legislation is trying to set up a process whereby council and the trust board will have conversations around what are the customary activities that iwi and hapu would like to carry out, and are the council rules getting in the way? And it talks about our statutory approval. That's essentially our council rules. In this context, that can be a bit wider than just the district plan. It could also include our bylaws. The other thing that we're required to do is to have a look at, and through a discussion, at whether any rules in our district plan itself are inhibiting the undertaking of customary activities. And when we think about customary activities, that's things like waka ama, launching of waka on the river itself, and probably most pertinently for us, the collection of natural plants, which are used for weaving or medicinal purposes or food purposes. So, the legislation requires us to have a conversation again, so we can understand what those customary activities might be, to then have a look at our rule frameworks, be they the district plan or our bylaws, and see if there are any restrictions within the district plan or our bylaws which are getting in the way of those customary activities, and then have a conversation about whether it's appropriate to change them. And it may be or it may not be. That's essentially our requirements with regard to customary activities. Now, I've been back through the district plan and our bylaws trying to think of logical examples. The only one I've come up with is our reserves bylaw, which has a clause which says you shouldn't go around cutting trees and plants that we've got in our reserves. Now, if we've got flax and there's a desire to go and collect some of that flax for some customary activities, I have a sneaking suspicion that just happens. But that's the one example I could think of where Tū Whātua Trust Board might come to us and say, your rule and your bylaw is getting in the way of our customary activity. Can we talk about whether it's appropriate or whether it could be changed? That's pretty much the extent of our requirements as mandatory matters under the river legislation. Any questions on customary activities?
Councillor.
Oh yeah, just one occurred to me. Tell me if it's totally out wrong context, but collection of freshwater crayfish that's in the water in an expanded JMA, well, that includes the lake. So how does that go? That's a customary activity, isn't it?
Yep, not us. We stop at the water's edge, so we don't have any rules which cover that. So not
no. I was speculating.
Oh yeah.
If it was if like the lake Mana was encompassing that would be part of it then, wouldn't it?
You're talking about Lake Taupō?
Yes.
Yeah. So clearly outside the geographic extent
of the of what we're looking at right now. No, I just speak. Well, okay. I don't know if there's freshwater crayfish in the Waikato River. Are there? If there is, who? That's a customary collection activity, is it not? Yeah.
I would think so. A bit like taking watercress is probably similar. That's
So no, I'm just interested how would that gel in the.
The purpose of this section is to identify, is there a barrier? Is there a rule? Is there something saying no, you can't do it? If there's nothing saying that you can't do it already in our jurisdiction, so whether it's our bylaw, our reserve management plan, yeah, things that we've got control over, that we've said in somewhere that you can't do it, that's the barrier that we're identifying. If there's other legislation or something else in terms of those customary rights, that's not our responsibility, that's not where we're going.
Well, I'm not supposed to go collect freshwater crayfish. I know that, but is that written anywhere, or is that? Well, I don't do it, but
it's not our function.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Foreman.
Jeez. So on the actual customary activities, a lot of what you've just said there sounds to me as if it is just, council doing its service for the community. We should be looking at what areas are getting in the way of our community living. So again, this is part of our BAU anyway, so we shouldn't be scared of what is in here. Kapai?
Correct.
That's business as usual for anyone who doesn't understand.
Thanks, Duncan. We understand.
Through
Thank
the
you,
chair.
Duncan, for clarifying that for me.
Through the chair,
Councillor Cameron.
if I have my understanding correct, in terms of customary activity in this JMA, it is to establish whether any of our policy or bylaws get in the way of customary rights. Yeah, thank you.
Correct. And then it's a decision for council about what, if anything, you do about that.
Yeah. No, I get it. No, I get that. It's just kind of like penny drop, where effectively we're deciding whether any of our policies get in the way of customary practices. Whether or not we amend those policies is a separate thing. So what's the point in identifying them if we're not intending on amending them?
You may well choose to amend them, but there might well be some situations where you don't. Or you place some restrictions in place.
Chief Executive.
Well, I'm just highlighting that. I think Nick's just pointing out what the legislation says, and so it's a decision of council, basically.
Thank you, Nick, and Heather, please carry on.
Right, last slide from us today. Just a little reminder, we've already covered off 2 workshop sessions where we talk about the requirements of the legislation. So Paul Beverley talked to you there. We've now finished discussing the compulsory matters which sit in the legislation. Next time we're hoping to come back and have a couple of workshops talking about the extension matters. And that's certainly where there's been a little bit of misunderstanding or tension in the past, so we want to work through what those mean, and we can talk about time commitments and cost commitments in the context of those as well. And then we'll move on to further discussions around your engagement responsibilities under the Local Government Act, what the new planning system is going to mean in terms of the JMA, and then we can talk about the options for progressing the JMA at that point. That's all from us today.
Just before you go there, Nick, Councillor Campbell.
Just a question of clarification, Your Worship. It's just regarding the apology at the beginning you made, and it was about you referred to statements made about the legitimacy and inappropriate remarks about the Te Whātua Māori Trust Board. I have a feeling it might have been me who made those comments. I'd just like to. Yeah. Well, can you just clarify what was incorrect or inappropriate? Because I don't actually recall what I said.
I
If it
recall,
was me.
I can help you.
Yeah?
I can help jog your memory. Effectively, you question the credibility and the legitimacy of the Tūwharetua Māori Trust Board. Now, in a legal sense, if I were the other partner to this agreement, i.e. Tūwharetua Māori Trust Board, I would view those comments as being defamatory. So actually, John, I was supposed to respond to you at the start of the meeting and actually thank you for addressing that matter. Because from the outset they were effectively defamatory, and if I were the other party to this agreement, i.e. Trust Board again, I know what I'd be doing to respond to that.
No, well, just to it was a question in my mind, and I've been asked it many other times, that does the Tūwharetua does it represent all the hapu
Councillor
around
Campbell,
the
I
lake and the
think
catchment?
we're at risk
that's
here
it.
of re-offending. I think the answer has been provided. It is in my statement, and I'm happy to give you a copy of it. Councillor Murch has just further explained it to you.
So
I
it does.
suggest we move on unless
So it does
any
represent
other
all the
questions.
hapu. Okay, that's the answer. Right.
So it's point of order, Your Worship. He's out of line. But your statement stands, and that was the end of it. It's not a discussion.
That's correct. So, Councillor Foreman, did you have a question? Or? No, I didn't. Thank you. Are there any other questions of the staff while we're here on this mandatory matters?
Just a question around the next steps of the process regarding the extension matters. Are we going to hear that workshop from council officers, or do you know, John?
At the stage,
Both, probably.
at the stage from council officers.
Nick and Heather, thank you very much for your presentation. You did well. So to all those online and the members of the public, I think we'll take a short break before we move into the next planning session we have. Thank you. Which